It's time to introduce this week's guests onto the Starship. In previous weeks, I have reported on the case of Hollie Greig, who is an extremely brave lady and is seeking justice for abuse which she suffered throughout her childhood and as a young adult. She joins me today on board the Richplanet Starship along with her mother, Anne, and legal representative, Robert Greig. So without further ado, let's activate the teleporter and get them beamed up onto the ship.
Wow.
Welcome on board the Starship, Hollie. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Good. And welcome,
Fine,
Anne.
thank you.
Thank you very much. A very pleasant journey too.
Welcome, Robert. Okay, now we're here to talk about a very serious issue. And before we get the discussion underway, because we're a little bit limited in time, I'm going to give I'm going to read out a page that I've prepared, which gives the salient points of the case, and then we can perhaps go into detail on various parts of it. Okay, so Hollie grew up in Aberdeen with her older brother, her father Dennis and mother Anne. At the age of 20 in the year 2000, Hollie's mother learned from Hollie that her father had been sexually abusing her since childhood. Hollie told her mother that her uncle Roy, Anne's brother, in 1997 that he had discovered her father abusing Hollie. Roy, as one would expect, was outraged and threatened Dennis never to do this again, but he did not tell his sister Anne. A few weeks after that, this took place in November 1997, Roy died in very suspicious circumstances. He was discovered in a burnt-out car with a broken sternum and a fractured skull. In the year 2000, after Hollie had told Anne about the abuse, Anne took Hollie to the police so she could make statements about the abuse. During the police interviews, Hollie gave information about more people who had abused her and that her father had instigated this. In total, Hollie has named and described 16 people who have sexually abused her. These people include a sheriff, a high-ranking police officer, now deceased, and social workers. The abuse took place between 1986, when Hollie was just aged 6, and 2000, aged 20. Now, 10 days after making the allegations to the police, social workers and police came to Anne and Hollie's house, and according to Anne, they sectioned her against her will under the Mental Health Act. They injected her against her will with a drug which put her to sleep. She woke up in hospital. Hollie was then taken into care. Anne sought out a leading psychiatrist so that her state of mental health could be independently assessed, and then later managed to regain custody of Hollie. Hollie's father now lives in Portugal with Hollie's brother. Neither he nor any of the other 15 people named by Hollie have been interviewed by the police to search for evidence or corroborate Hollie's claims. Hollie has received £13,500 in compensation from the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, but no one has ever been charged with any offence. Robert Greig has been acting as legal representative for Hollie in order to get justice. The quest for justice has so far been made impossible by what appears to be an establishment cover-up. The law firm Levy and McRae, acting on behalf of Elish Angelini, the Lord Advocate of Scotland, has issued letters and emails which have prevented Scottish media outlets from reporting the case. Grampian police also seem to have acted suspiciously. Firstly, by not investigating or interviewing any of the accused, and secondly, they have twice arrested Robert Greig on trumped-up charges, who was simply going about his lawful right to spread information about the case. So that's a summary of what we're facing, and I'd just like to, ask all of you, what's the current situation, Anne? I mean, are you more optimistic now than you were, say, a few months ago? Do you think you're making progress on this?
Certainly, yeah. There's a lot more people aware, certainly, of what has been happening. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do at this present time.
Mm-hmm. And you've been travelling all around the UK with your campaign.
Yes.
And how are you finding the travelling, Hollie? Because you went to Berwick the other day, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah? And you were telling me that somebody's written a song for you.
Yeah.
And what's that called?
Rocket.
No, it's Hollie wants justice.
Justice.
Yeah.
Hollie wants justice.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, I think 2 songs, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Another one. Do you know the other one's name?
Yeah, Hollie Greig.
Yeah.
And just for the purpose of the interview, when Hollie has been interviewed by police, generally there will be a specialist there.
Specialist.
Who, because Hollie is hard of hearing.
That's correct.
And so between yourself and the specialist,
Yes.
you know,
I'm never present at any of the interviews.
Oh, you're never
No.
present. Okay.
No, it's the specialist and the police that is with Hollie.
So for that reason, you know, it's probably not appropriate for me to ask questions, you know, about the abuse. So
Yes.
we'll ask them to Anne.
Okay.
Now, can you tell us, Anne, when did Hollie first impart this information to you, and what were the circumstances around that?
Well, I fled my home. My husband beat me up, and I went into a hostel, and Hollie came with me. I was trying to, because there's another element to this story as well. After my brother's death, you know, there was a family trust, and that trust went missing. And I was 3 years after my brother's death. The fact that the trust and the estate had never been wound up, so I had gone to the Law Society, and I was gathering information for that. And I was being stopped by my husband from doing that. So he beat me up, and I fled and went into a hostel with my daughter. And we were in there for 2 weeks. And I was trying to reassure Hollie that you know, everything was going to be all right, that I was going to divorce her dad, and you know, we would get a little house by ourselves. And you know, she says, "We've got to get the dogs, Mum," you know. And I says, "We will." She says, "But no, he'll kill the dogs," you know. And I says, "No, he won't, Hollie." I says, "It's me he doesn't like, it's not the dogs." "No, he will. He'll kill the dogs. He'll kill me too." You know. And I said, "Hollie, this has got nothing to do with you or the dogs," you know. And she says, "No, he will, because he touches me." And that's when she first...
Right. Okay. So I understand. And yeah, you're very keen on dogs, Hollie, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so that was how it came out then. Okay. And then, you took that up with the police, as anyone would.
Well, you know, I was absolutely staggered, you know. And I kept saying to her, "Are you sure, Hollie? Are you sure?" And she kept saying, you know, crossing her heart, "No, I'm not telling lies, Mummy." And the next day, she was going to be going out with a carer. And I says, "I want you to tell your carer," because I didn't know the right sort of procedure, you know, and I thought, well, she will know, you know, the correct way to go about this. And she went out with her carer, and when she came back, you know, I asked her carer, "Did Hollie tell you about her dad?" And she went, "Oh yes," you know. And I went, "Oh yeah." I says, "Are you not concerned about that?" And she said, "Oh well," you know. Really? And I went, "Oh well." I says, "Well, if you're not concerned," I says, "I am," you know. And I says, "And if you're not going to do anything about it, I will," you know. I says, "I'm going to go to the police." And then, of course, she insisted then that she would come with us, you know.
And can you remember telling your mum this, Hollie, in the hostel? Can you remember the hostel? Okay. Right. Now, so obviously you went to Grampian Police.
Yes.
And tell us what happened there.
I went, and myself and Hollie went in, and we saw a police officer there, and the police officer asked Hollie, you know, where this took place, and Hollie went, "Brazil," and that's the first that I knew, you know, how long this had been going on, you know, because I was really shocked. You know, I said, "Brazil," you know. I said, "Goodness me," I said, "she was only 6 then," you know. And again, you know, I said, "Are you sure, Hollie?" And she went, "Yes, yes," you know. And from there we were told, this police officer, you know, got everything sort of going, and we were told to go away and then come back, you know, sort of like the next day to a special suite that they had, you know, for this sort of thing.
Okay. And how many, was there just the one interview with Hollie in the police?
No, there was 3 days.
3 days of
interviews? It was done over 3 days, yes.
Okay.
And she did drawings and, you know, one-to-one with the police, and then she did drawings and.
Right. So these interviews then, were they taped?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Was
So
never,
you weren't there then?
No, I was not.
Right. Can you remember, Holly? You know when the police spoke to you, they have a machine where they put the tape in and then they press the button?
Yeah.
Did they have that?
Yeah.
They did? Okay. So you haven't pursued getting the... Because I think you're entitled to have those.
No.
I have to say.
We did get from Shrewsbury.
It may be a problem because already we have applied for the next of certain documents already, and we've been refused every time by the Crown Office under the Freedom of Information Act. They consider, the Crown Office of Scotland, it is not in the public interest for people to, not only us, but the public in general, to know the contents of those tapes.
Okay.
I think that is quite significant.
And you suspect that they injected Hollie during those interviews? Was that when?
No, that wasn't the first interviews that she did. And then we had to, over the summer, right, Hollie started coming out with these other names. And we went back to Grampian Police on the 25th of August.
Okay.
Right? And that's, I was again separated from Hollie, and Hollie was left with a social worker. And it was, you know, when I came back, Hollie was crying.
Okay.
And I said, I'll take you to McDonald's, Hollie, it's okay, you know. And we went to McDonald's, and she was definitely disorientated. She couldn't eat her burger, you know, which is unheard of, you know. And on the way home, she said that a social worker stuck a needle in her leg. And, you know, I was really astounded. And I thought, I immediately went right back to the police station and told them that. And they said that they would get a police doctor. And we sat for 2.5 hours in the police station waiting for this doctor. And this doctor never appeared. And then eventually we were told just to go home.
So when you say, so she was just disorientated then after this had happened. Can you remember that, Hollie?
Yeah.
Can you remember going to McDonald's?
Yeah.
And what did you tell your mum in McDonald's? Can you remember what you told her?
How did you feel?
Dizzy.
Dizzy.
Right, okay. Okay, and over the years, has there been any more interviews since 2000 then?
There was another...
Police interviews?
Yes.
Yes, there was.
So
In 2009,
Okay.
that
was when Grampian Police came down to Shropshire. Where
that's correct.
Okay.
That was held on the 8th of September, obviously last year, 2009. Anne was interviewed by police officers upstairs about some of the concerns from the financial point of view mainly.
Okay.
And Hollie was interviewed downstairs.
Right.
It was one of the special houses that they use for rape victims that are less intimidating than the police station. I was not allowed to be actually present in the room where Hollie was being interviewed, but I was allowed to sit in the kitchen next to a partition door where Hollie was being interviewed in the lounge. And partly because of Hollie's hearing difficulties, the conversation took place at a higher decibel level than we were doing normal. So I was, with my notebook, I was able to listen and note just about everything that went on.
All right, so you've got a record of all of that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
The interviews that were done last year, were they largely due to the fact that you've started this campaign then, Robert, do you think?
Yes, very much. They also followed an attack on Anne and Hollie's home, which we can't substantiate, but a gun was fired at their window in August, which precipitated the arrival of the Grampian Police.
Right.
And I informed both the Chief Constable of Grampian Police and the Scottish Government, Alex Salmond, that if anything happened to my clients, I would hold them personally responsible, because they'd been supposed to be doing a reinvestigation since January of that year, but had done absolutely nothing. It was only when this rather unpleasant incident, and we don't know who did it, there's nothing really too terribly substantial about it, apart from the fact that it did happen, and it immediately got a result from as far as they're coming up to conduct interviews.
And over the years, Anne has kept a lot of documentary evidence, although you have had some of it stolen.
Yes.
So just so that people understand what you have that can be put before a court or the police or whatever, I'm just going to show to the audience, you know. Okay. I'll put it there. So you and Okay. So this box contains, you know, a vast amount of files. That, you know, it's phenomenal that's the amount of documentary evidence, etc., that you've got. And you know, it's phenomenal that's the amount of documentary evidence, etc., that you've got. And I just want to come on to that because am I right in thinking that none of these accused people have been interviewed by the police, to your knowledge?
The only person that we believe has been interviewed was actually initially Dennis Charles Mackey in 2000.
Okay.
But in 2009, to the best of our knowledge, and we've looked in this fairly extensively and informally, not one of the people other than Hollie has been interviewed.
Greig was interviewed
Greig was, yeah, but that was in 2002, relating to another offence, actually, as it happened.
It related to another offence?
Oh, was the other? No. Oh,
it was because I insisted, I kept going back to the Procurator Fiscal and insisting that he be interviewed. And then eventually in 2002, they interviewed him. And he actually came to our home and was very abusive. And we tried to get an interdict to keep him away from our home. And when the interdict went towards the court, he put in counter interdicts, and in that counter interdicts, which, you know, we have a copy of, Grampian Police are apologising to him for having taken him from Portugal and telling him that he wouldn't be interviewed again and he would never be bothered again about this case.
Right. Okay. And I just wanted to ask you about when you were sectioned, because there's no, you tried to get documentary evidence of that, didn't you?
All the
and
papers have
they
gone
wouldn't
missing.
produce any. I mean, so I guess they would say that never happened. Is that?
Well, if I may answer that one, if that's right, Anne. Anne was sectioned on the 5th of September 2000. When she managed to get away from the Cornhill Hospital where she was being held, on advice of her lawyer, Yvonne McKenna, she then went to an expert, Dr. Ellen Smith, and asked for a full analysis. Dr. Smith can do the full analysis, obviously accepting she's been onto a very difficult time with all as anybody would be under those circumstances, but pronounced her perfectly sane, in no way schizophrenic, which is what would have been alleged by the doctor involved at Cornhill Hospital, Dr. Alistair Palin. On the 13th of October, as it was suspected that Anne had been unlawfully sectioned, it was beginning to suspiciously clear, Anne's lawyer then wrote to the Mental Welfare Commission of Scotland, who have hold the documentation, or copies of the documentation of such
and all
warrants.
sectioning has to be reported to them. It's part of the law.
On the 13th of October, Yvonne McKenna wrote to the Scottish Mental Welfare Commission. A letter which we have a copy of was received on the 1st of October from the Mental Welfare Commission, saying they have no record of any documents whatsoever to do with this very, very serious matter. That was less than 2 months after the sectioning. A letter comes back to say no document existed.
Okay. And you mentioned in a previous interview that they took you out of the house and you know, took your clothes off to inject you. Would they not have just injected you through your clothes? I mean, were you putting up a fight against that then? Were you physically trying to fight them off?
Well, what happened was that I went down to the bin room. You know, it was lunchtime, and I went down to the bin room just before lunch. And as I was walking back from I walked out of the building and all these people were there. And I walked right past them, went to the bin room, and on the way back, this new doctor that I'd changed to, because I was in a different area, you know, sort of spotted me, and she came walking towards me. And she says, "Mrs. Mackey," she says, "will you come inside, please?" And I says, "You know, what's going on here?" And she says, "Will you please come inside?" And I says, "Well, will you please tell me what's going on?" And that's when she says, "Well, we're here to section you." And I says, "Well, there is no way that's going to happen, you know." And I started, you know, putting up objections, obviously. And 4 men came over and bodily lifted me and took me and threw me onto the concrete floor of the apartment building and took my trousers and pants down and injected my backside.
Okay.
In full view of my neighbours, because by this time I'm screaming blue murder. And, you know, they're saying, "Leave her alone, she hasn't done anything," Yeah.
Did Hollie have sight of any of this?
She did when I was in the car park, yes. Yes.
Can you remember this, Hollie?
Yeah.
You saw that happen?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a lot of my friends are in the police, and I spoke to one today, and he's been a constable for 26 years. And I gave him the broad outline of this, and he said to me that if a victim brings to the attention of a police officer a crime and names a suspect, then he's obliged to follow that up. And he didn't see how they could avoid interviewing these suspects. He said that unless perhaps there was some kind of order from a high level, he said that you would always generally go and interview the suspect. He said that perhaps if you've got someone who you know has a habit of wasting police time and is known to the police to be unreliable, he said that what you would do is you would do enough to satisfy yourself that this person is wasting police time. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he said that if at the end of the day it boiled down to one person's word against another, then you probably wouldn't get a prosecution. Okay, but he said this is interesting what he said. He said that the only way that you can find out whether it's going to boil down to one word against another is by doing investigation, interviewing, and looking for other evidence. And only at that point, after you've done an investigation, do you know whether it is one word against the other. Yeah. He also went on to say that there are lots of things you can ask an accused. For example, or ask Hollie where it took place. You could then ask, well, would that have been a convenient place for both the victim and the perpetrator? Do you see what I'm saying? So you then look around. Is it likely to have happened where they said, or where Hollie said, and when it was done? And he said that there's so many different avenues you can look for corroborating evidence before you get to the point where you say it's just one word against the other. So I just want to say that if there's anyone in Grampian Police listening, that why have you not investigated these accusations? Why have you not interviewed any of the accused? Why is there not one of you brave enough to break ranks and go and interview any of these accused that Hollie has named? Because that's a point, isn't it, Robert? That police are not obliged to follow their superiors. They're obliged to the law.
No, I've actually mentioned that to Grampian Police already. The officers concerned, their obligation is to the law. It certainly is in England. I believe it's the same in Scotland, though there are differences. But I think that fundamentally is the same.
Okay.
I explained to the officers who arrested me that their duty is to the law, not to be told to what a superior officer or even a member of the government or the Crown Office might tell them to do.
So it will be perfectly valid for a police constable to go and interview some of these accused, and if a senior officer tries to stop him, he could then arrest that senior officer for preventing justice from taking place.
Conspiring to prevent the George course of justice.
Okay.
That senior officer could then be guilty of a crime.
If there are any constables in Grampian Police listening, please look up, Google Hollie Greig and put it on your conscience that you should go and interview these people. Okay. Now, there was also something about the sectioning that the niece of one of the accused was involved.
Yes, we understand that to be the case. We are making further investigations on that one, so we don't want to be absolutely firm on that at this point.
Okay.
But we do believe, there is reason to believe that a relative of some of those who have been accused was involved in the sectioning of that, and that is what we understand at the moment, but we can't quite establish that yet.
Okay.
Although we may be able to do before too long.
All right, Robert. Now, Hollie not only has named some of these abusers, she's named other victims.
Yes.
Can you tell me how many?
Yes, there are, apart from Hollie, there are 7 other victims who are all children at the time. Of course, time has gone on now, and many of them are adults now.
Okay. Now, and have they spoken out?
No.
Our informal investigations tell us that not one of them has even been interviewed. Obviously we challenged the police about this, but of course they've refused to pass us their details of the interviews under the Freedom of Information Act, which I think is extremely suspicious in itself. What have they got to hide?
Okay. So, I mean, there's 7 further avenues of investigation for any police officer wanting to look into this. And you moved from Aberdeen to Shropshire for obvious
Yes.
reasons. Okay.
Yes.
And when was that, Anne?
It was just the end of 2005,
Okay.
and we were helped by Women's Aid and also the Downs Association helped us move.
And how have you found living in Shropshire?
It's very nice, yeah.
Do you like it, Holly?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Because you lost your dog not long ago, didn't you?
Yeah.
Max? Are you going to get another one?
No.
No? Why not?
I don't want to.
She
You don't want
doesn't-
another dog?
No. No.
Why not? Do you get sick of walking it?
No.
She just misses Max, do you?
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, and with regards to Portugal, you mentioned that your husband fled to Portugal. Would that be a fair word to use?
Yeah, well, we already had a house over there.
Oh, you did. Right.
Yes,
Okay.
we bought a house in 1999 over there. So we were in the process of doing it up, and then we had intentions of going to live there. You know,
Okay.
we would all get to live there. You know.
Okay. And how did you come to be involved, Robert, with Hollie and Anne?
Yes, I was approached I think towards the end of 2008 by an organisation called Scotland Against Crooked Lawyers, who are also a political party as well, for whom I'm standing, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the Aberdeen South by-election. But the chairman and founder of the organisation, a very brave and loyal Scot called Stuart Usher, who's done enormous work for many, many people over the years, asked me if there's anything at all that I could possibly do to help these two ladies who are now living in England, having fled their home in Scotland. He'd been trying many years to try and bring it into the public domain, to get officials to act on this, and had met with a brick wall at every stage. And of course it was difficult for people, and I understand why now, for anyone in Scotland to take up the story, because they would have been crushed by the authorities straight away without any question at all. It had to be someone outside Scotland who was not subject to Scottish law. And that's why some people ask, why is an Englishman involved in this Scottish case? And that is the reason why it couldn't really have been anybody in Scotland, because they would have been put down and taken out in whatever way you want to put it, but they would have been certainly threatened. And as I've been when I've been up in Scotland, if they had done what I had done. I was only able to get the story going because I lived in England and was subject to English law.
Okay. And in February, you travelled up to
Yes,
Aberdeen
yes,
in
I
order
did.
to hand out leaflets in the street
That's
to bring
correct.
public knowledge about the case. And
That's correct. I decided that I was going to, because of the fact that the authorities were still continuing to obstruct all our requests, which is simply, has always been and remains, for a public and open independent inquiry into the circumstances about the case of Hollie and the other children, and also about the death of Greig as well, which we'll come to later. But that is all that we've asked, and after I had named people publicly, I called a public meeting in October, which I named all the people, and I also named the victims as well at a public meeting in Edinburgh. But it was only until I'd gone to Aberdeen, after just deciding that I would want to stand in the forthcoming general election, that I was arrested. Before I had the chance to meet members of the media and the public in Aberdeen, a city I'd never been to before, so I obviously wanted to introduce myself. If I was going to be elected, then I really needed to talk to the people there, but I've never had the chance to do that. That remains the case at the moment.
And so you're walking down the street with
Yes.
a pile of leaflets in your hand.
Well, in my case, I couldn't even see the leaflets.
Couldn't even see the
were
leaflets.
my case.
Okay, and tell me what happened.
Yes, I was just on a little side street close to Union Street. The meeting, the rendezvous, was supposed to be 10:30 outside one of the main stores, Marks and Spencer in Union Street. Around 10 o'clock on the side street, I was suddenly found that two plainclothes CID officers approached me and asked me my name, which I gave, and they said that I had a warrant for my arrest under the breach of peace, breach of the Peace Act.
Breach of the peace. Okay. And you were arrested again just fairly recently, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
So they kept you in for 3 days, was that
That's
right?
correct, yes.
So you were in a cell, yeah?
Yes, I was, in solitary in the cell, yes.
Okay. And you know, how were you treated in custody then?
I was treated reasonably well, and I think this is something I would like to put across, because on both occasions, both when I was taken into custody in February And when I was taken into custody again on the 14th of April, many people have said, oh, were you given a hard time by the police? Did they beat you up? Did they threaten you, make life unpleasant to you? I have to say, I don't really want, would hope that the people who are trying to support us would not mention that at all, because at all times I've been treated correctly by the police. And in fact, the 2 officers who arrested me in Warrington on the 14th of April were a credit to the police force. They treated me with kindness and courtesy and consideration at all times. So I don't want any attacks on individual police officers in any way, because they have done their job properly as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, yeah. Now, they put certain bail conditions on you, is that right?
Yes.
What were they?
Very draconian bail conditions, amongst them the fact that I could not visit Aberdeen or Aberdeenshire, that I could not communicate with anyone.
How can they do that? How can they, what's the reason for not, I mean, obviously we know what the reason is why they don't want you to visit Aberdeen,
absolutely.
but what's their justification for that?
Well, they consider that my presence and the things that I've been saying might cause alarm and harassment to certain of the people, or the people who are named.
Right. Your
That's
presence might cause alarm and harassment.
That's right. They weren't terribly concerned about the harm done to the vulnerable children. That seemed to be not a priority.
And you were arrested a second. Oh, sorry, you haven't finished the bail conditions, because there was another. Sorry, go on.
Yes. Well, when I was arrested on the 14th of April and taken up to Aberdeen.
Sorry, just to go back, Robert. There were other bail conditions in February, wasn't there, that you had to report?
Yes. Oh, they're quite. I have to report 3 times to my local police station in Cheshire and Warrington.
Right. So what's the point of that?
Well, I guess it's because I live a long way from Aberdeenshire, to try and make sure as far as possible that it's even difficult for me to probably go up to Scotland for any sort of meaningful length of time, I assume. It's just to make sure that I'm not going anywhere near there.
So yeah, I would suggest it might be so that you don't go abroad and give your story to American well, not American, but other foreign media.
That has crossed my mind also, yes.
Right, so carry on. You were then arrested a second time, and what happened then?
Yes, I was. I was charged the second time with not adhering to my breach of the peace, the bail conditions.
Right.
I said I disagreed with that, and they told me that it was because I had been speaking to the media, and it was because I had been making speeches in various parts of the country. I replied that I had studiously avoided Scotland. I hadn't given any stories to the Scottish media, nor had I entered Scotland at all since my bail conditions were.
But, I mean, what if 1,000 people start doing exactly what you're doing? Because that's what I suggest should happen. You know, what are they going to do? Arrest 1,000 people?
Well,
you know?
well, it's very difficult to know what they're going to do.
I mean,
actually.
It's preposterous, I have to say. Okay. Right. All right, Hollie?
Yeah.
Good. Right. Now, we mentioned the death of your brother. The autopsy report, you had some problem getting hold of that. Is that right?
That is correct.
I mean, one would expect that you're the next of kin, that you should be entitled to an autopsy report.
Yes, I thought so.
And how long did it take to get that?
13 years.
13 years. Okay.
Well, almost 13 years,
Yeah.
just under 13 years.
Yes.
Okay.
And we had great difficulty in getting that at the end. The Crown Office still continues to refuse to send us the autopsy, despite numerous requests over these, not just by me, but by the financial advisor as well, who's been very helpful in the case. And eventually they told us that it wasn't their practice to send these out, but what they would do was to get a doctor, an expert, to actually tell us over the phone, or tell Anne over the phone, about the autopsy in a way that she could understand, because if we saw it, we might misinterpret it.
Right,
That was
okay.
how it was put to us.
Right, yeah. Okay, but you actually then took it to a pathologist, didn't you, when you did get the...
Yes.
Yes, we insisted that we had it. We said, if we don't understand it, we'll take it to an expert, and they'll explain it all to us. But we'd like to have that, and we believed Anne was entitled to it.
Okay. And you were telling me off camera that somebody else, you assume someone else may have got a copy of this report.
Yes, and this is quite disturbing. On Sunday night, there has been some altercations or some disagreement with the BBC about who were going to do the story.
Sunday the 25th?
Yes, the Sunday, yes. And during an interview there, the reporter involved, investigative reporter Mark Daly, came on air to sort of challenge certain things about the story.
BBC reporter?
BBC reporter, yes, who led the team who were supposed to be doing the investigation. Now, there are lots of different points of view that will never be resolved, I'm sure. But what disturbed me, and it came right at the end of the show, that he appeared to be reading from a document that resembled the autopsy that we had had. Now, as this was confidential, and we had obviously the greatest difficulty in even the next of kin getting it, we are surprised that the BBC were able to get a hold of this document, if that is the case. We can't know for sure. It's up to the BBC to answer that. But their reporter was apparently reading from this document. And I have to say the autopsy played no part in the BBC's investigation, because we hadn't any documents at the time, and we didn't pursue that line when they were doing the work on it.
That's intriguing, and which brings us on to the whole question of the media. And really, it's a disgrace that you've got to come on my show, you know, the Richplanet Starship, because other media outlets like the BBC and all of the mainstream media will not entertain you on their shows, that you have to come on a show like this one. And it is a disgrace, I have to say. Now, they are controlled or do not cover the case because of this, well, I think the term people use is a D notice.
Yes.
Defence advisory. Now, do you know much about that, Robert, that system?
Unfortunately, I don't. It's not something I really feel competent to discuss, although I understand that such things have been issued against certain media outlets once the story looked as if it was really going to start to get into the mainstream. Unfortunately, I understand that the people who receive the notices are not allowed to tell anyone that they've actually got them. So that is my understanding of it. So nobody can tell them whether you've got them or not.
Well, I had a chap on the other week and we were talking about that, and he told me that any notice is purely advisory, that these media organisations, by following that notice, are, you know, they don't have to by law follow it. If they think that it's in the public interest for them to publish that information, then they can go against that notice. So they're complying with, you know, whoever's issued those warnings. Okay, and you said you were standing for Parliament, Robert.
That's correct.
I mean, just to touch on the legal system and the police.
Yes.
I mean, it looks to anyone with half a brain that there's an establishment cover-up in this case, and possibly lots of other cases. You know, how could it be resolved if the people who are the authority are the ones that are corrupt? I mean, who polices the police? Who judges the judges? What can we do?
I think the only thing that can be done, this is of course the difficulty when all the people involved in the corruption really hold all the levers of power, which they use ruthlessly to suppress anyone who actually wishes to bring this terrible, terrible case and things like it. Because it's a general view that we're not just here for Hollie and the victims that we know about. We're very concerned about the whole situation, and we think that there's must be great risk to children all over Scotland over this, for the same reasons that we're coming up against. The only thing that what we've always asked for is for a full, open and independent inquiry. And I would defy anybody who has looked at the story in any detail whatsoever and seen all the circumstances to turn around and say that they could not see any reason for that to take place. There are so many things that are wrong, misstatements, quite clearly documents going missing, people being failed to be interviewed, just so many, a whole catalogue that I don't think any reasonable person could turn around and say this is not a case for a full and open public inquiry, preferably to be held outside Scotland.
And because there are 7 other victims who haven't basically had statements taken from them, we can probably assume from that there's a lot more than 16 people. I mean, you think that this is the tip of a huge iceberg.
I have reason to think that is the case. Of course, I cannot verify that, but everything about the story and the prodigious efforts of the authorities to actually conceal it from the people of Scotland, because that's what they're doing. They're concealing this from the people of Scotland. And when I said to you, anybody who knows the facts or hears about this would really want to investigate it, that is the last thing the Scottish authorities want, and that is why they have done everything to suppress information, and that is why they have been trying to prevent me from standing as Member of Parliament, because they cannot face the fact that if this was put before the people of Scotland, people of Aberdeen South and the constituency, the full facts, it would be a disaster for the Scottish Government and many other people in positions of authority in Scotland. Many heads would roll, and they're terrified of that.
It's the first domino.
It's the first domino, yes, that's what I believe.
Yeah. Okay, and you know, if one looks on the internet, well, not the internet actually, at other cases, such as the Cullen inquiry into
Yes.
Dunblane, you know, there was possible abuse going on in that case, and Operation O, which was in 1999, which was a move by, I think the FBI were involved and the British government to try and find abusers of children. And I believe a D notice was put on information that was recovered from that operation. So it's strange how they use these D notice
Yeah.
Yes.
for cases involving children. How could something of that nature possibly be a matter of national security?
Yes, and of course the thing that's, I think, an open question that I think everybody is entitled to ask, what kind of people actually are trying to protect the people who are very likely to have committed these crimes? I say very likely because we don't want anybody convicted unfairly. It has to go through due process. But who is trying to protect these people? A very basic question, and why?
Now, a lot of people can't contemplate why somebody would abuse a child, and some people would say even more so someone more vulnerable.
Yes.
So, I mean, not that I'm trying to make an excuse, but is there any explanation? What's going on? Why? Can we go there? I mean,
well, I think it's very difficult for most people, I say normal people, it's difficult to say, but I think you know exactly what I mean. I think it's very, very difficult to put oneself in the minds of the people. And we would probably need an expert in the subject to answer that question rather than me. But what we have been given to understand is that this is systemic and tends to go in families over many, many generations. So children are literally born into these abusive conditions. And of course, they're brought up like that. They're brought up to live a lie. And they're also brought up in fear that if they discuss anything that goes on within the family outside, something terrible will happen to them. And I believe this is the case. This is one case. And I think that tends to be how these rings exist and proliferate and carry on over and over again. And there also seems to be some indication that people involved in this are sometimes deliberately placed in key positions in authority. So, as in this case, which I think may well be the case here, although I've no proof of that, that there may be people who have a vested interest in the case not coming to light.
And I've also heard it alleged that there are certain Freemasonic connections with this. I mean, do you want to bring that into the conversation, or would you rather just leave that?
No, I don't. I'm quite happy to answer that on air. What I would like to say is, during this investigation, I'm really not interested in tarring people with the, unfairly on this. It would be very unfair. And I don't want to mention any organisations, whether they be public organisations, secret societies, any other organisation. I don't want to say that those people are behaving that way because they're part of that society or anything like that. I have no evidence to support that. And I think it would be very unfair to make any implications against people who belong to those organisations. I would feel in the main that most people in those organisations are very good people and would be just as sickened about what is happening as the rest of us. That's my view.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a crime by certain people, and
that's exactly.
Okay. Okay, Robert, you're standing for Member of Parliament of Aberdeen South, and the election is tomorrow.
Yes.
And so is there anything that you'd like to say to the people of Aberdeen with regards to your campaign?
Yes, what I would like to say is that to think when we talk about the issues in this election, the most precious gift that we have, that is our children. And I am the one person, I believe, who has stood out all the time to protect those children. Without looking after our children, what kind of society have we? We can talk about taxation, we can talk about foreign policy, we can talk about the economy all we want. But what is that if we don't look after the most vulnerable members of society? And that is what I'm here to do, not just for Hollie, but all the other children. I'm here to actually do my very best to bring this into the public domain. I don't want to attack other parties because I really want to talk about what I would do to help the people in Aberdeen, and I would help them with other means as well, not just over the children if I had the honour of being elected. But all the other main parties, the Scottish National Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party have had full information about Hollie's case for many, many months now, and not one of them has had the courage to stand up about this. The only party, a major party in Scotland who have been very good in supporting this are the UKIP party. They have helped. But I do want to say that this is it's not a question of politics. We have support from all spectra, from the right and the left and the centre. It's nothing about other policies. People from various political views are all united in their abhorrence of these terrible attacks and atrocities against children. And I will do the very best, but I'm sure that all kinds of obstacles will be put in my path. But I promise the people of Aberdeen South that I will do everything in my power to resolve this and protect the children in the future and bring to justice to those who have suffered in the past.
Okay then, Robert, thank you very much indeed. And do you have any feel for how many people in Aberdeen are aware of Hollie's case? I mean,
Well, there was a survey done in Aberdeen, and 100 people were surveyed, right? It was stopped and asked if they knew about the case, and only one person knew.
Okay, so it's low. Well, if there is anyone watching who lives in Aberdeen or knows anybody who lives in Aberdeen, please you'd be able to send them this interview, Google Hollie Greig, and find out about the case and get the word out in Aberdeen, because it needs to go out in Aberdeen, doesn't it, if you're going to stand any chance. We need to get this information to those people. Okay, is there anything that any of you would like to add?
If I may just ask one thing, Anne, if that's all right.
Yes.
What I would do, and I'm sure Anne and Hollie would agree, I think I'm speaking on behalf of us, to thank all those wonderful people, brave people, loyal Scots in Aberdeen, decent people who have fought to get me as an MP when I can't, and when I have the situation where I cannot even enter the city and address the issue. Also, well, Aberdeen specifically. Yes. All those wonderful people have worked so hard to get me, and I continue to work hard. They're very brave and they're very loyal. They're real Scots patriots. Scotland is full of very, very good people. Yeah. Only a small minority behave in this way. So I'd like to thank, on behalf of all of us, to thank all those wonderful people.
Okay then. Well, thanks for coming in, Robert. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hollie. Okay. Have a safe trip back.
Thank you.
Okay, and it just remains for me to say, keep your eyes on the skies, your feet on the ground, and tell everyone you know to Google Hollie Greig and join the campaign to get justice for Hollie.